Okay, so thank you for joining the onboarding call today. If everybody wouldn't mind just making sure they're on mute, that would be great whilst we go through everything. If you've got any questions though, please feel free to ask or type them into the chat box as well, and we can also go through those as part of the Q&A section. So to run through the agenda for this afternoon's call, firstly, we're going to look at how you can all onboard onto the platform. So as key sellers on the Advantage scheme, we need to make sure you're registered on the platform and you know how to do that, how to set up your two-factor authentication, how you can then add more users to your company. And we'll briefly go through the Advantage scheme process timings. We'll then go into the platform itself and I will show you the key weekly tasks. So uploading your transactions and committing them to the buyers, and then also how to review your transactions as well. So where you can see them through various states and in different parts of the settlement cycle. I'm going to touch as well on scheduled reports. So scheduled reports allow you to export data on a regular basis from the platform automatically. And I will be showing you how you can set those up so you get information delivered to you at the regularity that you require. And lastly, we've also got the Q&A section. So it's your opportunity to ask Mari and I any questions about the platform or any questions or concerns you have of anything that we've gone through on the webinar. So as I say, please feel free to add those to chat or ask verbally. I don't mind either way. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to quickly talk you through how to register. So when you're registering on the platform, you will receive an email invite from us in which there is a link that you need to follow and complete certain details. Some of those fields will be pre-populated because we have received that information from Advantage and we're in the process of migrating you, so that should make it easier for you. To run through those fields though, we've got the company name needs to be complete. We've got the company ID. If that's not pre-populated, you can add that as either ABTA, IATA or TIDS. I know most people use the ABTA ID at the moment. You can see an example as well on the right hand side of what the registration form looks like. The company address, the country, the email address and the name. Important things to note about the email and the name. So when we send out the registration emails, they'll be sent to a key contact provided to us from Advantage. Now, normally that key contact will be a person using Travel Ledger, but if, for example, that goes to somebody who doesn't need to access Travel Ledger, they can forward that on to you. So if a different colleague gets that email and you're the person who wants to register and set up, then do ask them to forward that email on to you. You will note though that when you go to register, that the email address and the name will be pre-populated as that person who initially received that email. So do make sure you update that email address and name. Otherwise, when you associate a password, it will be with that email address and that name. So just make sure you double check that if someone's forwarded it on to you. You do need to set a password, so you'll get advised by the registration page. If that password is secure enough, you can see here it'll go from red to green when it's happy that it's an acceptable password. And lastly, you need to accept the terms and conditions as well. So you'll notice on the bottom here, you've got the option to agree to terms and conditions, which you can also click on and have a read of when you're registering. We do have a demo video on this, which I won't show you now, but it will be available to you and I can share these slides so you've got a direct link to that as well. Okay. So how to set up two-factor authentication. So when you first register on our platform, we will require you to complete two-factor authentication. It is a mandatory part of registration. The reason for that is it adds an additional layer of security to your Travel Ledger login. So your username and password will always be required, but two-factor authentication will be as well. And with it being a payment platform, we do find it really important that we have that extra security in place. You can watch a video on how you set up two-factor authentication, which again we have here, and our registration process has what we think is a really nice stepper process that takes you through that. So you'll see in the example here, there's instructions on downloading the app. So whether you want to do that on your desktop or on your mobile, we give the option. Most people will use, say, the Google Authenticator on their mobile, or they'll use the Authy one on their desktop. But it works with lots of other authenticators as well. It's not just those. If you already have, say, like a Microsoft one, it would work. And then you would scan a QR code to set that up. You then get a recovery code for if you ever lose that, and then you would complete the process. So it's not too complicated. As I say, we do have a video on it, and we can provide additional support if needed, if it's something you've never done anything like that before. But I know a lot of people have perhaps similar processes and two-factor authentication with things like online banking or PayPal as well. Okay, so once you're registered on the platform and you've set up your two-factor authentication, you'll be able to log in for the first time. When you log in for the first time, it's a good idea to add any additional users from your company that may need to access the Travel Ledger platform. And this is easily done. You would go to our settings area and to companies and users. You can then go on and invite somebody new. Now, when you are creating a new user and sending them a registration email to set themselves up, you need to assign them as either an admin or a normal user. So an admin user has access to all areas with no restrictions. So, for example, they can go into settings and they can make changes to your company setup, or they can be a normal user where they don't necessarily have access to those things, but they can still upload and action transactions. So a normal user can do the day-to-day stuff, whereas an admin has a little bit more influence and can change things in the company's area. I would advise, if possible, that you have more than one admin, simply because in the case of annual leave or somebody being off unexpectedly, it gives you that ability to still manage your admin settings within the platform during that time. Secondly, we also offer within the admin area, companies and users, you can look at users and you can reset their two-factor authentication. So if somebody was doing two-factor authentication through a mobile app and they got a new phone, then they may need to reset their two-factor authentication. We can do that through our support team, but obviously you've got to email us for that. We will complete that request and then get back to you. Whereas if you've got an admin available, an admin can do that for their users. If you've only got one admin user, then they can do it for all the normal users, but it would take another admin user to reset an admin, if that makes sense. Okay, so that is a bit on registering on the platform. So we've briefly gone through filling out your registration form, setting up two-factor authentication, and how to add additional users. I will point out, when you add additional users, they also get a registration email similar to the one that you received when setting it up. There's less information to complete, obviously, because they're just going on as a user, but they will sort of add themselves in essence once they complete that registration email link. So moving on to the process timing. I just wanted to go over this with you briefly. I know you'll be aware, a lot of you, of how this works, but I just wanted to clarify on it. So the advantage cycle is made up of 2 seller file uploads and buyer review periods before entering the settlement cycle. So essentially, sellers have the opportunity to submit to buyers twice before the settlement actually starts. So let's have a look at this broken down in the table below. Firstly, we have cycle 1. So the seller can upload a file into Travel Ledger. Most sellers will do this on a Thursday or Friday, and they've actually got as late as 9:59 on the Monday morning to submit this. And the reason we say 9:59 on a Monday morning is if they don't submit before this time, then it will miss the start of the buyer review period. So the buyer review period then starts, and your buyers have between Monday at 10 and Wednesday at 15:59, so pretty much 3 full working days to review their transactions. They need to either accept, amend, or reject those transactions. So I know in CAPs previously they may not have had to accept them. In Travel Ledger, they will need to go in and make sure they accept them. So that's something to keep your eye on. So once we reach 4 o'clock on the Wednesday, those transactions are locked. So the buyer needs to have taken action on those transactions prior to that time. Otherwise, they won't be eligible to enter the settlement. The seller returns file is then generated. So you can get access to your returns file to see what has been accepted, amended, rejected, or not actioned by your buyers. And then you can update your back office system accordingly with that. So that's entering cycle 2 now. So cycle 1 has happened, and we know what has now been accepted, rejected, amended by the buyers. So anything that was missed by the buyers or any new transactions can then be put into the second cycle's upload file. So again, you have that same period to upload. It's that Thursday, Friday through to 9:59 on Monday morning to upload your transactions to the buyers. The buyers then go ahead and have that same time frame to review those. So Monday 10 a.m. to Wednesday 15:59 before the transactions are locked. Now on this second cycle's transactions locked, that is when the settlement day happens. So at 4 o'clock on that second Wednesday is when eligible and ineligible transactions are identified. So that happens in the hour after the buyer review period ends, and any direct debit mandates are validated, and any failures are also excluded from the settlement. So you get, firstly, the transactions are identified. So any transactions where the sellers can see the buyers have rejected them or they haven't reviewed them will be removed and not included in the submission. And the same goes for any direct debit mandate failures. Again, any transactions associated with those would be removed. So then the collection submission happens. So all the valid direct debit mandates with transactions that are accepted or amended by the buyer are put into the submission, and that happens at 5 o'clock on the Wednesday. Before then, the collection is executed on the Friday, and the funds are cleared the following Wednesday morning, and then payment submissions are made to the creditors, and the full cycle is then completed. So that's just an overview of how the 2 cycles work, and then what happens once the settlement day is met after the second cycle, and what happens to all the transactions for you. Okay, so now we've been over the registration process and had a look at the process timings. I'm going to take you into the actual platform now, into our demo environment, and just go through some of the key processes with you. So things you'll do all the time, which is uploading your transactions, being able to review those, and then also scheduling reports. Okay, so I'm going to log out and I will log back in fresh for you. So we get to the login page for Travel Ledger. This is a demo environment, so the URL is slightly different, and I'm going to log in. You'll notice that I don't have to complete two-factor authentication because it isn't a real live environment, but this is a point where you'd enter your email address, your password, and then your two-factor authentication would generate a code in your app, which you would then input, and then you would get to the login page. So when you first log into the platform, you'll notice down the left-hand side, you've got your main menu. So transaction partners, notifications, settings, billing and help. And it defaults to the transactions page simply because this is where most people spend most of their time. So this is where buyers and sellers can review their bookings, they can review remittances, and they can upload their files as well. So that sits across those 3 tabs under transactions. What we'll do first, as we are sellers, is we're going to go into file uploads and look at submitting and committing a file to the buyers. So if I click on file uploads, you'll see here I have a dedicated tab where I can upload a file. Before I show you this, because this is how you manually upload a file, what I wanted to point out to you is that under settings and data delivery, we have an area here where for those of you who want to submit files either by SFTP or via email delivery, we have an area where you have the instructions and the configuration for that. So you can see here, we can enable delivery by secure FTP and also by email delivery. I know for most of you, and for me, it would be a case of saying to my IT team, okay, we're going to deliver by FTP. Here are the instructions for that. Can you set everything up on our side? All the instructions are here. So this is where you would point them and this is where you would garner that information. Same for email delivery. If you're going to deliver by email, you can turn that on and you configure the email addresses that will be submitting that data. Quickly, just to point out as well, we do have a list below as well, which in the data delivery area, we show all the files, whether they're submitted manually or automated through FTP or email. We show all the files that have been sent to the platform, when they've been sent, what type of file it is, the file name, who sent it, the number of records, value, and the status of that file. So has it been loaded or has it been rejected, for example. So you can see here there's examples of files that have been loaded and rejected. So you've got record of that available to you at any time, and you can also even download copies of those files for your sort of auditing and reference purposes. Today I'm going to show you manually committing a file. So if I go back to transactions and then file uploads, we have a button on the right hand side which is labeled as upload file. If I select upload file here, I can then either drop my file or choose my file from my computer by clicking on this box. So I'm going to grab a file that I prepared earlier. I'll just show it you briefly as well. So this file is in the text format. We do have instructions provided on how to make sure your file is in this format as well. So we've got some information on that for you. If you need that, please do contact us and let us know if you need some support. But essentially this is what my file looks like. I've just got a few transactions on here. It's easily a file that comes from, a CSV converted into this format. So I'm going to choose this file, actually, this Advantage demo file too. So if I click on here, You can see my file is now ready for upload. I'm going to point out this button to you here, which is called auto commit. I'm going to leave it switched off just so I can show you the process sort of whole. But what this does is if you select auto commit on, it directly, if everything is fine and everything matches within your file between buyer and seller, then that file is then automatically committed straight to your buyers and you don't review that before commitment. I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to show you how to review it, because you may get examples where you have auto commit turned on, you submit your file and say it's got 1,000 transactions. Well, 990 of those transactions match and they auto commit to your buyers. But you might have 10 transactions where there is a match and unmatched files. For example, they could have a suspended commercial link, or there could be something going on with the buyer that you weren't aware of, in which case they would drop into this grid that you can see behind this box. So if we don't auto commit, everything drops into this grid. But if you do auto commit, then only the problematic transactions, so the unmatched ones, would drop into this grid. So I'll turn auto commit off for now. We've got our file, so I can click on upload. And you can see my 5 invoices have now been imported. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see who the seller is, who the buyer is. You can see the scheme, so the processing entity, the booking references, the passengers, departure date, due date, the amounts, commercial link description, and the status match. So any unmatched ones would show up here and they'd also be highlighted as unmatched. So if I'm happy with these 5 files, I can then commit those to my buyer. So I can either select all here and commit, or say I only wanted to send 4 of them, I wasn't happy with one of them, I can select 4 there and then click on commit as well. So you'll see those go off to the buyer. If I wasn't happy with this file, I noticed there's an error or it was unmatched and I needed to sort it out, you can actually update partner, or you can click delete and then you can reload it. So this one I'm going to show. I'm going to delete that one record. Okay, so I've sent off those 4 transactions to my buyers. So what happens next? If I want to review those transactions, I can do that in the Bookings tab. So in the Bookings tab, you'll see another grid which contains all your information here. So about the buyer, who the processing entity is, your booking reference and passenger information, the cycle that the booking's in, so when its review end is, what your payment date is, what your original amount is, as well as a current amount. So just to explain this area to you a little more, an important factor in bookings and something we developed from feedback from users is this quick view functionality. So if you populate this drop-down list here, you'll see that there are 6 quick views to choose from. And they range from buyer to seller. So there's essentially 3 quick views for each, which are the same, but 3 are aimed at buyers and 3 are aimed at sellers. The reason you see both buyer and seller in here is we do have companies who act as both buyers and sellers within the Travel Ledger platform, and therefore they need access to both sets of quick views. So the quick views you've got for sellers here are current week, you've got all due, and you've got past. So what do they mean? So seller current week captures everything that is entering settlement or review end is within this week. So if I log in on a Monday, I would see everything that has a review end between Monday and Sunday at midnight. In contrast to that, all due will display all those transactions I've just mentioned. So anything that is entering, so is at review end with some immediacy, but also anything beyond that. So there is the ability to set credit terms within the platform. So for example, you can set 30-day credit terms for certain partners, and therefore you could submit a transaction to them today, but it would have a review end date in 30 days time. If anybody is interested in doing that, please do let us know separately to this call, and that's something we can discuss with you, setting credit terms. But that's a good example of how all due works. So it's not just looking at this week's review end transactions, it's looking beyond that. It's looking at everything that you've submitted to your buyers. Lastly, we've got past as well. So if I click on to, at the moment we're on all due, you can see current week. And then if I click on past, so past actually shows you past transactions. So it's going to look at any transactions where from the last review end date to 2 weeks before that as well. So our last review end, you can see here, we've got a 2-week period that covers. All this is tailorable, all these filters can be changed as well, and it's worth bearing in mind. So if I go back to our seller current week view here, you can see some transactions I loaded just now and some others that I loaded previously. You can review those here, and you can also make changes to what is on display to you as well. So you'll see there are filters applied. It's highlighted here. We've got a review end filter. So we're only looking at transactions from today until Sunday, because we want to see this current week and things that are open for review by the buyers. But you can change this. You could look at it differently if you wanted. You can change the date period on there. We also have the ability to filter on any of the other fields. So for example, if you were operating on more than one scheme, so say Abta and Advantage, you could filter and just look at bookings on one particular scheme. And you can also filter if you're looking for an individual booking. I could search for all bookings with surname Scott, for example, here. And it would just retrieve those, and you can have lots of filters working together in parallel as well. So what you will see is as buyers start to accept, amend, reject bookings, you'll see this transaction status update here. So at present, this is unmatched because we haven't had a buyer go in and action any transactions. We've only just loaded them. But if we go on and look, we will be able to see things that were accepted, amended, rejected, void, and you can filter on those. So that's easily done. A good example of how you would use this well is if you went on say a Wednesday morning and wanted to check any transactions that you could see your buyers hadn't even looked at yet or hadn't taken action on, so you could send them a chaser. You could go in and filter on matched, and then it would just display you any unactioned transactions like these, and then you could reach out to those particular buyers and contact them and say, make sure you log in today, this payment is due. So yes, you can use those filters. We also have, you can see where a buyer either amends or rejects a booking, the original amount and the current amount will change. So the original amount is the amount submitted by you as a seller, and the current amount is the amount that the buyer has agreed to. So if they just accept, then £799.99 would stand. If this £110 was rejected, that will go down to £0 on your current amount. And if, say, this other transaction here for £89 was rejected, again, that would go down to £0. Or if amended, then say to £79, that would change between the two columns. So you'll always get your original submitted amount here, and then the amount the buyer has agreed to in the current amount. Where a buyer does reject or amend a booking, they do have to apply a reason code here. So they've got this big list to choose from. But as you can see, we've got buyer notes here where we will have at some point soon the ability to also add free text comments as well as a buyer. Okay. Another useful thing as well is, like I say, you could just look at matched. You could actually use hide actioned. I forgot about that one. When you're doing your quick view, if you want to hide actioned, what that button would do is it would hide any transactions that have been accepted, amended, rejected already, and just display those ones to you that require action. So again, another useful tool when chasing up. I want to touch on as well in these views is your ability to configure them to your requirements. So you can see you've got several columns here, you've got quite a lot to go at. These quick views were designed to improve the user experience, so make it easier for them to target certain data sets and retrieve those, but also to display buyers and sellers the minimum information required, so they're not overwhelmed by data and columns. So the idea is these quick views do just show you what you really need. We do have lots more columns available. If you go into the columns tab here and select the button, you can see there's a huge list of columns and the ones displayed are ticked. But if, for example, you said, well, I've got the payment date displayed here and the review end date, but I want to know what the collection date is. So when are those funds actually collected from that buyer? If you really needed to know that, you could actually select collection and it would add that column in. And once you've added that in, that is remembered by your computer. So that's stored at computer level. So if you've added that in once, that'll next time you log out and log back in again, as long as it's on the same computer, that will be stored. So that's how you add and then remove those columns. You can also sort the columns as well. So if for here you say, well, I would like to know the passenger name before the booking reference, you can switch those around. Likewise, you can say, oh, I want to know the buyer name before the buyer ID. You can also switch that around as well. So they're really easy to move. And again, that stores at computer level. And there's nothing for you to do next time you log in. That's just stored with your preferences. Okay. So if I just as well, I want to show you the remittance area. So if we have a couple of different ways we can look at remittances. Remittances, obviously we've got the remittance tab here, which is really useful. And we've also got the ability to look at remittance within the bookings area, obviously at past transactions. So where transactions have entered settlement, we can view the remittance as well. So if I click on past, so where remittance applies, you'll see the top transaction was rejected, there was no collection and therefore there's no remittance. But the transaction underneath here was amended, so there was a part payment made for that. You'll see if we click on the little downward arrow on the left hand side, we can actually open up the remittance advice. So the remittance advice from a bookings view, so when you're in the bookings quick views and you go into past, you'll see remittance advice on a transaction by transaction level. So I can see from this individual transaction which wider remittance it's linked to and the reference for that remittance. So if I wanted to check whether a certain transaction has been paid, then that's a really good way to do it. Alternatively, the other view on remittances flips that on its head. We click into the remittance tab here, and then we use the filters to find some remittance. So it goes on to the last collection submission as a default filter here, just to reduce the amount of data that comes back. But if I remove that for now, just so we've got some examples, because this is just the demo area, you'll see you've got examples of remittance here that are from the perspective of the wider remittance. So you've got a remittance here for 575, and what you can do with this, you've got all the reference and all the information, the dates for that, you've got the payment references. You can actually open that up and you can see the individual bookings that remittance is linked to. As noted here, it does just show the first 10 bookings, so you can scroll and you can export the full list of bookings linked to that remittance. So that's another way of reviewing remittance from an overall perspective, and then being able to drill down into the individual bookings associated with that remittance. So in summary of that, that's an overview of uploading your file, so how you do that manually, but also we touched on data delivery and how and where you can configure delivery by FTP or by email. And we've then committed the file and looked at how we can review any bookings through the quick views in the bookings tab. And then we've moved on and we've looked at remittances either at individual booking level or also then remittances from the top level in the remittances tab. The next thing I wanted to go through before we move on to the Q&A section is how you can export your data from the platform. So you may have noticed within these three tabs, all of them have an export icon here, a little export button. So I'll go back into bookings for this because it makes sense. We go on our current week here. You can export data from the bookings grid and so any of the transactions grids, you can export your data. There's a couple of ways you can do this. But firstly, I want to point out that what you export from this grid is going to be exactly how you have it set up in the grid. So the order of the columns on display, and any filters, it's going to take those into account. So you can have your setup here, you're going to have a data set and you think, right, I need to take that offline. I want to share it with a colleague and I want us to work on that data offline. So I'm going to export that. So you can click on export here and export all data. What that then does is it instantly downloads a CSV file to your computer, which you can then click on, open up, and it shows you all your information as per the grid. So you can take that away and work on it offline if needed. When you do that, you do have the option as well to only take certain parts of your data set and export. So say I've got 9 transactions here. I could select just these 3 are the ones I want to work on offline. I would then go to export, and instead of selecting export all data, I now have the option to just export selected rows. So I can click on export selected rows, again get a file, and you can see I've just got those 3 transactions in this file instead now. So that's how you would export data whilst you work. So if you're working, you come across some information, you want to take it offline, you want to review it, then that's the tool you would use here. So you would export. As I say, it's available in bookings, it's also there in remittance, and it's even there in your file upload if you need it. We would suggest that for reconciliation purposes and just to make your daily life much easier, that you have a look under settings and go to our task scheduler function. So task scheduler here allows you to run regular scheduled reports. So instead of having to export and look up data in that working environment of the transactions tab, what you can do is you can deliver data directly to your email or in a FTP folder at a regular basis, as and when you need to configure that. So I'll go through setting one of those up with you now. It's really easy to do. You do it under Task Scheduler, as I say, and you have a template here that you need to complete. Once you've completed a template, all your scheduled tasks are then stored in this grid below, so you can review them and edit them if you need to. A good example of a scheduled task we see sellers using regularly to support their reconciliation is once a buyer review period ends on a Wednesday afternoon, a seller will often want to review what's been accepted, amended, rejected on a Thursday morning. So perhaps we want to set up a report that exports all bookings for that last 7 days period to be delivered on that Thursday morning. So I'm going to call this file. Firstly, I've got to give my task a name. So I'm going to call it Thursday bookings report. We then go down to templates, and this is where you can select the file you need. So we've got the basic seller rec file, which is the same as what you had in CAPS, which is the text file which you can push into your back office. We've got a failure file, which is in this environment because it's a test environment, but essentially this is a new report that we've developed, and there'll be comms going out on that soon. We've then got the transactions report, which is what I'm going to use in this example, because that's going to give us all the transactions broken down in a CSV file format, and will show what's been accepted, rejected, amended, or not touched by which buyers. We've got remittances, so it's an export of any remittance advice. And we've also got companies, which is not a particularly useful report to you, I don't think, at the moment. Essentially exports all the companies on the platform, but we do have a separate area in the partners grids that does that for you, which is a better function really. So if I go to the transactions one, as I mentioned, I'm going to give my file the name again. So Thursday bookings report works for this. And you can see the format here is CSV. If there's multiple format options, you can pick them on the list, but for this one, it just comes in CSV. And then you can choose the period that runs across. So if we drop down here, you can do that from anything from just today's bookings right through to all the records that you've ever had. This one on a Thursday, you would set to 7 days because it's going to capture all bookings loaded in the last 7 days. So if you've set it for Thursday morning, it's going to capture everything right back to last Thursday morning. So all the bookings you've loaded for the review period for the Monday to Wednesday just gone. You can then decide on your delivery method. So we've got secure FTP and we've got email delivery. Most people tend to use email delivery for this, but FTP is there, and the instructions for configuration again are in data delivery. So if you select email delivery, which I'm going to do in this example, then you can either click so it goes to all company admins, or you can specify individual people. So perhaps you've got somebody who isn't on the Travel Ledger platform, but would like to use this information and would use it regularly for reconciliation purposes or for some other purpose, but they don't actually need access to Travel Ledger. You could add in their email address here so that they receive this report. So it saves them ever having to come into Travel Ledger. They can just access that information on a CSV file if that's all they need. The next thing we need to do is schedule when we want this report to be delivered to us, what frequency. So I'm going to say I've got a start date for this report of today. I want it to come to me from now. And I'm not going to put an end date in because I want it to run continuously until I may decide to delete it at a later date if I no longer need it. If I only wanted this report for a month, though, say, I could schedule it to only run until the 8th of July. So that's an option too. We've also got the option to add in a time of day. So I'm going to say I want this report at 8 a.m. I want it ready for when I log on to start the day. and I want to receive that weekly. As we just said, this is going to be my Thursday report. You can have multiple days of the week it's received on if you want. So I could add Monday and Thursday. You could also decide to have that monthly, first day, last day, or put a specific date in. So that they're all options when you configure in this. But as I said, I'm going to stick at the moment with every Thursday because I think this is a report that you'll likely want to use. So now I've set up that schedule, I can click on save. The task has been created. And if I look down my list here, I've got lots of examples configured. We should be able to find it here. So Thursday booking report, that's the one I just created now. So you can see all the details about that report, when it's due to start, what period that report covers, what kind of template it is, when it's going to run, and the CSV of it, who's going to receive it as well. On the left-hand side, you do have some actions you can take as well with this. So I know I'm going to get that every Thursday morning by email now. But if I went on, say, I wanted to do it on the Wednesday night instead of 5 p.m. Because I'm working late, I'm not going to be in Thursday morning, I could actually run that report. If I click on run, it will deliver that report with immediacy to my email address. Alternatively, I can also download that report. So I could click on download here, and then I automatically get that report right now, delivered to my computer as a download. So we've got that file here with all the data in there. And then we've also got the option to edit the report. So say I wanted to change the date it runs on, or the period it runs for. So I wanted it for the month instead of 7 days. I can do that here with the edit button, go into the template, update it and save. And then I could also delete it. So if I decided I no longer need that report, I could actually go in and click on delete, and that task is then removed from my task scheduler. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to show you in the platform today. It was to give you an overview of the transactions area, uploading and committing, reviewing transactions, and then the couple of different ways you can export your data to support your processes offline and any reconciliation. I think it's important to point out as well that we do have lots of support available to you. So I will make these slides available, but we have our YouTube channel. So if you went onto YouTube and searched Travel Ledger, it will bring up our YouTube channel, and you will be able to watch any recordings of webinars or any how-to videos. I will include this webinar on the YouTube channel, so it's there for your review if you needed to look back on anything. We have our wiki, which is essentially our online guide to the platform. It covers all the different areas of the platform in detail. And if you couldn't find any information in the wiki, you felt like there was something missing or it didn't answer a query, we do have our help desk email address. So you can email support@travelledger.org, and one of the support team will be in touch with an answer to your query. So that's how you would raise a support ticket. Okay, so that was everything I wanted to go through. Also, in terms of the things we've been through today, I'm aware that with the registration and the two-factor authentication, on the slides there are links to videos. These are also in your welcome packs as well. So these slides are very similar to the content within your welcome pack. So your welcome pack will be able to support you in accessing those videos and accessing the wiki as well. And we do also have the sandbox environment. So if anybody wants to join and have a go at uploading their files and reviewing them and having a look at the processes we've been through today, you are able to do that in our sandbox environment. So do just get in touch with Mari or myself, or email the support email address, and we will be able to get you set up in Sandbox. Okay, so that's it from me. I just wanted to see if anybody
Aurelio
has
has
any
a
questions.
question.
Yeah, I can see. Have you reviewed the question, Mary? What was the question?
Yeah, I think it was about if they can upload the Excel file instead of the text format. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so at the moment, Mary, I'm right in thinking we've got to use the text format at the minute, haven't we?
Yes.
But we have got some support on how you can switch your Excel file into the text format, which I can share. So Mary, if you could just take note of who needs that, then I'll be able to share that if that's okay.
Yeah, Aurelio, we can come back to you by email. Maybe we can arrange a call separately and we can show you how to do it.
Sure. Oh,
perfect.
Okay. I think we've got another question in chat as well. Okay, yeah. Has anybody else got any other questions they want to ask verbally as well is fine. Just please ask. No? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. Mary, have you got anything you wanted to add or from an account management perspective?
Well, ideally, if you are ready, actually, we can start to onboard you from the 19th of June, 17th of June. If in the meantime, as Michaela mentioned, you want to have a go with the test environment, a sandbox, we can give you access to that. I'm going to be in touch in the next few days just to send you again the record video if you want to share to any one of your some of your colleagues or anyone else of your company. And if you have any query, any questions in general, you can just, come back to any of us, really.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so thank you everybody for your time. It's much appreciated. Any questions, like Mary says, just give us a shout and we'll be in touch. So thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.